In today's video, we are going to be ranking the top 25 managers in Championship history based on their points per game record. So we're going to be taking this one back to 2004 when the Championship was rebranded as it is today up to the modern day. And in order to go ahead and qualify for the video, the manager must have taken charge of at least 25 Championship matches. Now obviously points per game is by no means the be all and end all when it comes to judging how good a manager is. You know, all these managers have worked with different resources and things like that, but nevertheless it's interesting to see how they all stack up against each other. Before we get into the top 25, we also have some honourable mentions to give out who just missed out on the top 25 ranking. We've got Mick McCarthy, Neil Warnock, Eddie Howe, Aitor Karanka, Tony Pulis, Roy Keane and Steve McLaren as a few notable names who just missed out on the top 25. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. Starting out in 25th place, we have the former England manager SVEN-GORAN ERIKSSON with a points per game record in the Championship of 1.59. He did have a fairly short stint with Leicester City back in 2010. He actually took over Leicester while they were in the relegation zone, guided them to a comfortable mid-table finish, but then the following season things started to unravel somewhat for the manager. He was heavily backed in the summer transfer window with signings such as Kasper Schmeichel, David Nugent and Paul Konchesky, but ultimately they were a little bit off the pace at the start of that season and ultimately parted ways with the manager. Ultimately, the spine of the squad that he had put together went on to be promoted and subsequently soon won the Premier League title after that. Coming in 24th place, we then have Frank Lampard with a points per game of 1.61, of course, just in charge of one season in the Championship, that being with Derby County. He managed to guide them into the Championship playoffs, had that unbelievable playoff semi-final victory against Leeds United, but ultimately they fell short to Aston Villa in the final. In 23rd place, we have the first of the managers who is currently managing in the Championship. That's Blackburn Rovers' Jon Dahl Tomasson, who just qualifies for today's video as he's now taking charge of 26 matches for Blackburn. He's got a points per game record of 1.62. Now, his points per game record is massively boosted by the fact that he's yet to draw a league game with Blackburn, which is absolutely ridiculous 26 games in. Blackburn have been this all or nothing side so far this season. It may end up steering them to the playoffs, or it may end up in some second half of the season implosion, I'm not sure. Coming in 22nd place, we then have Chris Wilder with a points per game in the Championship of 1.64. Wilder's record overall has been somewhat tanked by that, stint he had at Middlesbrough, particularly in the first half of this season when they looked miles off the pace. But let's not take anything away from the genius of Chris Wilder and particularly that Sheffield United side that he had. Promotion from League One followed by great stability in the Championship, which ultimately led with another promotion and that unbelievable first season that he had in the Premier League as well. Steve Bruce may have lost his touch these days, but he's actually coming in 21st place with an average points per game of 1.65 in the Championship. Let's not take anything away from, back in the day how good of a manager Steve Bruce actually was and the sides that he has gone ahead and had a overall net positive impact on. His last promotion in the Championship, of course, coming with Hull City. Since then, his powers have massively faded. We saw that quite dismal spell that he had in charge of West Brom, but back in the day, Bruce was your guy if you wanted promotion. SLAVISA JOKANOVIC has been another great manager in the Championship in years gone by. He's in 20th place with an average points per game in the league of 1.68. Obviously guided Watford to promotion, then did a great job at Fulham as well, also taking them up to the Premier League via the playoffs. His most recent stint in the Championship with Sheffield United didn't go to plan, but he has had some great sides to watch over the years. In 19th place, we then have Billy Davies, always a fun character in the Championship from years gone by. He's got an average points per game of 1.69, obviously. Formerly at my club, Preston North End, took us so close to promotion, actually went ahead and did that at his next club with Derby County, and he's one of the few managers to have managed both Derby and Nottingham Forest. He actually had 2 stints at Forest, in which time there have been countless stories, quite funny ones at that have come out about Billy Davies over the years, but he's actually been out of work since 2014, since he last managed at Forest. Alex McLeish is in 18th place. He obviously did some great work with Birmingham and getting them promoted up to the Premier League, also winning the League Cup with them, albeit there was quite a bit of controversy surrounding his exit as he decided to leave and head to local rivals Aston Villa. In the Championship, he's got a points per game record of 1.69 29, which is fairly impressive. In 17th place, we then have Thomas Frank, obviously ripping things up in the Premier League with Brentford at the moment, but was really made in the Championship and really took that Brentford side to a whole nother level following the exit of Dean Smith. Brentford, for a few seasons, were the sort of nearly men of the Championship. Everyone was sort of rooting them on. They had some great individual players to watch, but it just felt like when it really mattered, they couldn't quite get over that final hurdle until they were eventually promoted, and deservedly so, because for 3 or so seasons in the Championship, Brentford were absolutely outstanding. Next up then we have Chris Hughton, who has been probably somewhat tarnished by his most recent job not going to plan at Nottingham Forest, but let's not take anything away from the great manager that he has been in this league in years gone by, with an average of 1.71 points per game in the Championship. 2 promotions to his name, one with Newcastle, who absolutely blitzed the league that year under him, also another with Brighton, and he really was the manager, you know, to go ahead and move Brighton onto that next level, get them promoted up to the Premier League, playing some great football and also solidifying them in the top flight in the process. Sean Dyche is a bit of an opinion splitter, but there's absolutely no doubting that he gets the job done. He's in 15th place with an average of 1.72 points per game. Obviously, we've seen him in charge of 2 Championship clubs, Watford and then Burnley, where he is, of course, most known for, and probably more known now for actually being a Premier League manager. It does seem as if Dyche himself is waiting it out for a Premier League job to come his way. I think there have been a number of Championship vacancies over the past few months when he has been out of work that would have been happy to take him, but I think he himself is holding out for that Premier League offer, it would seem. Another manager who is making the name for himself in the Premier League at the moment is Steve Cooper. He's next on the list in 14th with a points per game in the Championship of 1.74. Looking at his Championship CV, it is incredibly impressive. 2 seasons with Swansea, 2 playoff finishes. He then takes over at Nottingham Forest when they were sat rock bottom of the Championship, guides them into the playoffs and ultimately gets them promoted. And Forest right now are probably reaping the benefits of going ahead and sticking by Steve Cooper after a few really difficult months with him in the Premier League, as they're now out of the bottom 3 and looking like they're wanting to secure their status as a Premier League club. So yeah, Steve Cooper, great manager. In 13th place, we've got a bit of an opinion splitter of a manager. We've got Valérien Ismaël with a points per game record of 1.75. Now, let's not let, you know, what happened at West Brom tarnish anything that he did at Barnsley, because that season was absolutely miraculous. From one of the relegation favourites to have gone on and got themselves into the playoffs was incredibly impressive. And even at West Brom, while the football itself wasn't to a lot of West Brom fans' liking, and they did go on a really torrid run of form towards the end of his spell there, they were still in the playoffs when he was sacked, and obviously Bruce took over from that point and they went ahead and crashed and burned out of the top 6. Next then, in 12th place, we have SLAVEN BILIC, the current Watford manager. He's still trying to work out the right balance there at Watford, but has obviously been a fantastic Championship manager in previous seasons gone by. The West Brom promotion season, for example, it was a really fun team to watch actually that year, you know, with Matheus Pereira, Grady Diangana, Kravinovic all pulling the strings for that West Brom side, and it was a shame that things with him and West Brom didn't quite work out in the Premier League. In 11th place, we have another former West Brom manager and a former Champions League winner in Roberto Di Matteo. Also guided West Brom to promotion, had them finishing in 2nd place back in their 09/10 season. Also had a fairly short stint with Aston Villa in the Championship, but that one was fairly short-lived. Coming in 10th place, we have Daniel Farke, and what a manager for Norwich City. Maybe even we took him a little bit for granted, given Norwich's struggles this year. You know, he was working with, you know, some of the biggest resources in the Championship in terms of the players that he had at his disposal, but boy did he get a tune out of them. The 2 promotions he had with Norwich, his side played some of the best football that we've seen in the Championship over the last decade, and with a points per game of 1.82, considering that he's managed 138 Championship matches, is seriously impressive. Some of the other managers that we're going to discuss later on in today's video in the top 10 have managed significantly less games than Daniel Farke have, and yeah, that just shows he stands the test of time as one of the best we've ever seen in the Championship. Coming in 9th place, we have Steve Coppell, who was of course in charge for Reading's 106 point season, a record which I'm not sure that's going to ever be beaten, because since Reading went ahead and set the bar that high, we've seen some unbelievably brilliant teams in the Championship, and yet no one really has come close to ever matching that point tally. Coming in 8th place, we then have Scott Parker, who is a little bit of an opinion splitter amongst the modern Championship fans, I'd say. He does have 2 promotions on his CV though, each with the 2 clubs who he has managed in the Championship, one with Fulham via the playoffs, the other one with Bournemouth. Sometimes, you know, what people hold against Parker is that he has worked with, you know, some of the best squads and players in the Championship, but it's been on him to get the best out of them, and he has delivered when it matters with 2 promotions. In 7th place, we have Sam Allardyce, who only actually managed 1 season in the Championship as we know it today. That was with West Ham, and he did end up guiding them to promotion. West Ham were the outright favourites for promotion that year, if my memory does serve me correct. They ended up finishing 3rd, but did get promoted via the playoffs. Ricardo Vazte with the playoff heroics in the end against Blackpool. He's got a points per game record in the Championship of 1.87. Coming in 6th place, we then have Marcelo Bielsa with a point per game record of 1.91. Bielsa ball was some of the most fun and chaotic stuff that we've ever seen in the Championship. A near miss on promotion during his first season in charge when he went on to finish 3rd, lost out in the playoffs against Derby County, but the second season they absolutely stormed the league that year, didn't they? Playing some absolutely wonderful football. I've just got so many memories of, you know, Pablo Hernandez and Bamford just absolutely ripping it up. Coming in 5th place, we then have Marco Silva, only managing 1 season in the Championship, the season just gone by, but what a dominant Fulham side he was in charge of, with a record in the Championship of 1.96 points per game. And dare I say it, he could have gone on and probably boosted that one up a little bit further. Fulham just seemed to maybe get a little bit complacent in that second half of the season, because when Fulham were good, they were one of the most dominant teams I've ever seen, and, you know, Mitrovic was on fire. Speaking of dominant teams though, Rafa Benitez was in charge of Newcastle, who absolutely stormed the Championship while he was in charge. He's coming in 4th on today's list with a points per game record of 2.04 in the Championship, so we're now into that above 2 points per game threshold, which is absolutely ridiculous. But Benitez was clearly a Premier League level manager, and let's be honest, he was working with pretty much a Premier League level squad then. Coming in 3rd place, we then have NUNO Espirito Santo. He was in charge for Wolves during their promotion season. Obviously they'd recently been bought out, brought loads of Portuguese talent into the squad, and I mean, looking back on that squad now on paper, what a team it was they had, and you know, the stuff that some of those players have gone on to achieve since, all making it in, you know, top European leagues in the Premier League and elsewhere. But interestingly enough, Nuno is actually the highest placed manager on today's list that has taken charge of at least 1 full season, and with a points per game record of 2.15, it is seriously impressive. Coming in 2nd place, we then have Vincent Kompany, who's ranking above all-time Championship managerial greats with how good he's been with this Burnley squad so far this season. He just about qualifies for the threshold for today's video, because he has now taken charge of 26 Championship matches, and I don't think anyone's in any sort of doubts that Burnley are just going to storm the Championship this season. They have been so far by far and away the best team in the league. They're playing some great football, and Vincent Kompany tactically has just got it spot on this year. But coming in 1st place, we actually have XISCO MUNOZ with the best Championship points per game record in Championship history of managers that have taken charge of at least 25 matches. Now, XISCO was appointed midway through Watford's last promotion season. Things weren't quite going to plan under Vladimir Ivic whilst they were still in the promotion picture. Still felt like they were playing with the handbrake on, and XISCO basically came in, took that handbrake off, and they absolutely flew from that point forwards. And with a points per game in the Championship of 2.19, it is seriously impressive stuff. A shame in the end that it didn't work out for him and Watford in the Premier League, and since that sacking really, Watford have just been on this downwards trajectory. But guys, there we have it. Those are the top 25 Championship managers in Championship history based on their points per game records. Do you think there are any other big names that have been omitted from this one that you thought might make the cut? Let me know down below. But apart from that, guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.